This corporate event was supposed to be another triumph of his power, but just one woman who dared to enter the restaurant turned his world upside down. Robert considered this evening to be one of the most successful in his life. He sat at the head of a large table, surrounded by staff who readily laughed at his every joke. In one hand, he had a glass of expensive single malt scotch, and under the other hand sat a young passion, his assistant Charlotte. The entire elite restaurant was rented especially for this corporate celebration. A jazz melody was playing in a low voice. Lanterns twinkled with colorful lights. Tables were full of exquisite delicacies. Everything here screamed of his success and unlimited power. Charlotte, his assistant and part-time secret lover, was sitting with her whole body pressed against him. She cast languid glances at Robert and laughed too loudly for everyone to see who she was. In her short, shiny pencil skirt and deliberately defiant behavior, Robert saw only a reflection of his own strength. "That's the kind of man I am," he thought with self-satisfaction. "Can I afford a young beauty while my wife is sitting at home in a fleece robe?" One of the colleagues winked at Charlotte and asked with a grin, "Isn't your wife jealous, Robert?" "A spouse?" Robert snorted, took a long swig of scotch, and grinned contemptuously. "What can she do? My pet Scarecrow is sitting at home with the offspring. Let her sit. That's where she belongs." The table roared with laughter. Even those who were embarrassed laughed out of politeness. Charlotte giggled and hugged his shoulder. Robert broke into a smile. He loved those moments when his word was unquestionable and his jokes were the cause for everyone's amusement. He was always sure that everything was exactly the same at home. He had never thought seriously about his wife, Sarah. Once she was a different person, a lively, intelligent, energetic law student, then a junior lawyer at a prestigious firm. But after the birth of children, she seemed to disappear into everyday life. Now her life consists of housework, laundry, extracurricular activities for children, and school activities. For Robert, she became something like a familiar piece of furniture, comfortable, inconspicuous, and most importantly, one that would not go anywhere. Who needs it? 2 kids, no career, only parental leave. There are thousands of people like her, he said, confident that his wife would not leave. The banquet went on as usual. Robert managed to tell a couple of poignant jokes, raise a toast to the success of the corporation, and insert another joke about housewives. "You're complaining about your own people here, but at home I have a free maid, a chef, and a babysitter all rolled into one, and all this is my Scarecrow from the provinces." Laughter rolled across the table again. Charlotte threw back her head and laughed loudly, kissing him on the cheek. Robert felt like the master of life, but it was at that moment that something happened that he had never expected. The doors of the establishment opened, and a couple entered the hall. A statuesque, confident woman in an elegant dark figure-hugging dress was coming down the steps. Her hair was tied up in a neat bun, and her posture was impeccable. She was holding a briefcase with documents in her hands. Next to her was a tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s in an expensive suit. They were talking quietly about something. At first, Robert couldn't believe his eyes, but when the woman looked up, everything inside him stopped. It was Sarah, his wife. The laughter at the table instantly died down. The colleagues turned around one by one, and Charlotte, squinting with a venomous smile, whispered, "Well, that's what your Scarecrow is." Robert felt his ears burning. He didn't know what to say. Sarah and her companion named Daniel took a table in the corner. Documents, a tablet, and a notebook appeared on the table. They were deep in discussion. It was a business meeting. Sarah looked like a stranger, not the woman he left at home in sweatpants that morning, but someone completely different, confident, collected, attractive. Robert got up and walked over to their table. Sarah looked up, looking at him calmly, without a trace of embarrassment or anger. "Good evening, Robert. This is Daniel Harris, my partner in the deal. We are discussing the details." "The project. I'm sorry," he muttered. "The one I was talking about. Legal support for a network of preschool educational centers. We are opening new branches." A vague memory popped up in Robert's mind. She actually mentioned something about it when he was mindlessly scrolling through social media on his phone. He just nodded and didn't listen. "We'll be done in 20 minutes, she added. "If you're still here, I'll come over." She looked down at the papers again. Robert felt that he had been pushed aside from his own life. When he returned to the table, there was already an awkward pause. My colleagues pretended to be busy with their own business. Someone was flipping through their phone. Someone was pouring themselves sparkling water. No one dared to laugh. "Sarah has a significant project," the young analyst Tommy muttered uncertainly. "It's nothing. It's all kinds of paperwork," Robert muttered, but no one laughed, not even Charlotte. She sat in silence, looking off to the side. For the first time, Robert realized that his jokes no longer worked. 20 minutes later, Sarah came to their table. Daniel stayed at the table, talking on the phone. "Robert, can I talk to you for a minute?" she said. He rose obediently. They moved back to the column. "I'm not going to make a public scene," Sarah said softly, "but don't ever call me a scarecrow again." "Sarah, that's humor." "Corporate," he managed. "I heard," she interrupted, "and it's not just me." He lowered his eyes. "Okay, I'm sorry. We'll talk at home." "We'll talk, but one thing is already clear. I won't let you treat me like that anymore." And she left. Robert returned to the table, but the party was over. No one looked him in the eye. Charlotte was nervously flipping through her phone. The colleagues looked at each other. He sat staring into his glass, and for the first time in many years, he felt not triumph, but embarrassment and anxiety. The wife he thought was a faceless housewife turned out to be a person with power that he no longer controlled. And for the first time, he had a thought: what if I lose her? Robert woke up before the alarm went off. The house was too quiet. No children laughing, no sounds from the stove. There was a note from Sarah on the refrigerator door. "The water for the coffee maker is running out. Add it." He had never noticed such notes before. Today they seemed like an indictment. Her household existed even without him. The smartphone blinked. A message from Charlotte. "How are you?" He texted busy and dropped the phone. No explanation for myself or her. In the office building, he was greeted by the familiar smells of freshly brewed coffee and work computers, but the staff looked at him differently. Some with curiosity, some with mockery. At the workshop, he got confused in the technical terminology. Tommy suggested it. The key customer frowned. Manager Samuel picked up and brought the presentation to the end. Robert felt something that had always been his pride, the ability to hold an audience, slipping out of his hands. After the meeting, the senior vice president called him aside. "You're out of shape. Tommy will lead the next meetings, and they also asked me to come in. There are rumors about the corporate party." Robert nodded. It sounded like a harsh decision. Charlotte came to the office by herself, without smiles, without coquetry. The folder is in his hands. His eyes are cold. "I'm transferring to another department," she said. "It will be better for everyone. Because of..." He couldn't even finish. "Because of everything," she replied evenly. "I don't want to be the subject of conversation." And anyway, it had to be finished. She turned around and left. Robert was left feeling empty and strangely relieved, as if he had kicked off tight shoes that had been chafing for too long. At that time, Sarah was standing in the empty room of the future preschool center. Bare walls, gray floor, the smell of dust. She spoke to the property owner confidently, without pressure, but in such a way that it was difficult to object. Daniel was nearby checking the estimates, picking up the technical details. After the meeting, they had coffee. Daniel said, "It's easy to work with you. You know what you want." "Not always," she replied, "but I know exactly what I don't want." Her voice sounded like she wasn't just talking about work. In the evening, Robert cleaned the apartment, washed the stove, laid out the dishes, and even wiped the dust. Not for her, but because for the first time I noticed the chaos around me. Then I took a notebook and honestly wrote 3 columns: what I did, what I didn't do, what I can do. In the first, humiliated, cheated, did not listen. The second one, he didn't thank me, he didn't ask. In the third, block Charlotte, offer family counseling, take the children for the weekend. His hand was shaking as he wrote, apologize publicly. On Monday, Sarah arrived without the children. He was wearing simple jeans and a sweater, and his hair was tied up. I sat down at the table calmly. I will not live in a place where I am humiliated, she said. It's not an emotion, it's a fact. Robert nodded. I was wrong. I closed the story with Charlotte. Ready for therapy? I am ready to apologize to you and to those who heard. Sarah looked at it carefully. Flowers would be easier, she said softly. She took out a white envelope and put it on the table. The divorce papers are here. It's not a threat, it's insurance. If everything stays the same, I'll sign it. Robert did not touch the envelope. Thank you for being direct. The kids are with me this week, and yours this weekend. She stood up. Let's see how you're doing. On Saturday, Robert threw a pizza party for the kids. The cheese was flying all over the kitchen, and the dough was sticking to my hands. The pizza turned out to be clumsy, but delicious. The children were laughing. He's with them. In the evening, when they fell asleep, he took a picture of a slightly burnt piece and sent it to Sarah. We are alive. And he's up to his ears in cheese. The answer came immediately. That's how it should be. On Monday morning, Robert raised his hand at the weekly meeting. A small announcement, he said. At a corporate party, I allowed myself humiliating words to my wife. It was wrong. I apologize to anyone who heard this. There was silence in the hall. Then someone clapped their hands briefly. Samuel nodded. Robert exhaled. He knew it was just the beginning, but for the first time in a long time, his words weren't a mask. After talking to Sarah and that envelope on Robert's desk, he had an obsessive thought. He took steps. He cleaned, cooked for the children, went to the supermarket himself. But there was one question in her head. Who is Daniel? He understood that this was a working partner, but there was a picture in his mind all the time. She's wearing an elegant dress. He's tall, confident. His wife's calm gaze next to another man was worse than any flirtation. One evening, he drove to the building where Sarah had a meeting. I sat in the car and waited. His heart was pounding when he saw them walking out together, talking. Daniel reached out and helped open the door. No hugs, nothing superfluous. But Robert felt like everything was boiling inside. He called her right away. Where are you? At the meeting, I'm finishing up. With whom? With Daniel, Sarah replied calmly. He wanted to say, I don't believe it, or don't you dare, but he said nothing. She heard in his voice not concern, but fear of losing control. Everything was changing in the office, too. His colleagues stopped being afraid of him and stopped respecting him. They no longer laughed at his sharp words at the meetings. Tommy, yesterday's errand boy, now led projects confidently, and his superiors noticed this. Samuel began to do without Robert at key meetings. In the smoking area, he heard someone say, he used to be a king, but now it's like he's gone. Those words stung more painfully than any official remark. Charlotte was no longer looking for meetings. He saw her several times in the hallway. A short nod and a businesslike look, no hints of the past. It was as if she had crossed him out as an extra line in the financial report. At first it hurt, and then it was empty. He realized that the connection with her was just an illusion of power. When the illusion fell, there was nothing left behind. On Friday, Sarah brought the children. They immediately ran to their rooms. She stayed in the kitchen. How was the week? She asked calmly. Normal. Worked. I was with the kids. I cleaned the apartment. Okay, she nodded. I saw your message in the chat. Thanks for taking me to class. These simple words should have sounded like praise, but it seemed to Robert that she was talking to him like a neighbor. To be honest, he couldn't stand it. Is there something between you and Daniel? No, Sarah replied firmly. I have a job, and my personal business is none of your business. Robert lost his temper. So now you're living for him, preening for him, projects for him, and who am I? Elena got up from the table. You answered yourself. Who am I? You lost that right when you decided to make a fool of me. I'm getting better, he shouted. Correction is not jealousy or surveillance. Correction is about actions. She took the bag. See you on Sunday. The door closed. Robert stayed in the kitchen with the feeling that his words and actions would ring in his head until morning. On Saturday, he took the children to a local park. The younger one was enjoying the swing. The eldest rode next to him on a bicycle. Dad, she asked suddenly, are you and Mom getting divorced? He froze. Why do you think so? Because you're angry all the time, but Mom is calm. When people are so different, they're usually not together. Robert felt his heart tighten. Coming from her daughter, it didn't sound like a threat, but a statement of fact. We're trying, he said softly. Truth. She nodded without looking, and it was worse than any childish tears. The calendar year was ending. The company celebrated its successes. The same restaurant, a similar room, but the atmosphere for Robert was completely different. He went there without pleasure, as if for an exam. There was a thought in my head. Last time, I became a laughingstock. Today, I will either improve or break down. Colleagues greeted each other politely, but without the same lightness. Charlotte was sitting at another table, busily discussing something with Tommy. Samuel waved his hand. Sit down. Robert sat down and poured himself a glass of water. Alcohol was too dangerous. He listened to the toasts of others and was silent. Silence has become a new weapon for him. When the music started, the colleagues came out to dance. Robert stayed. Looking at the dancers, he caught himself thinking, he used to jump first. He joked the loudest, hugged me by the shoulders. He was an observer today. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from Sarah. I will. My heart skipped a beat. He did not know how she would appear, as a spouse or as a judge. The doors opened almost the same as last time. Sarah entered in a simple but elegant dress with discreet makeup. Her hair is gathered, not ostentatious, but confident. Daniel followed her, but he went straight to another table, apparently for work. Robert stood up, and his colleagues exchanged glances. Déjà vu. Only now he didn't smile or say anything loud. He came over and said softly, I'm glad you came. Me too, she replied. We need to end this conversation. They moved aside to a small table. Sarah took the envelope out of her bag, the same one, and put it between them. Do you know what this is? She said. I don't play. I'm tired of playing games. Robert swallowed. I understand, but let me tell you. She nodded. I was destroying what we had with jokes, cheating, and indifference. I've lost respect for you and for myself. I'm not apologizing for the sake of form. I want to change what's left if you give me a chance. Sarah was watching intently. There was no pity in her gaze, only a sober assessment. You've changed, she said, but I don't have to take your word for it. She opened the envelope, took out the papers, and pushed them towards him. I'll leave the choice to you. If you sign it now, we'll leave. If you don't sign, I'm waiting for business. Not words, but deeds. At that moment, two colleagues approached their table, saw the papers, and froze. Robert realized that everything was back in front of everyone, just as it had been then. But now the reverse scene. He picked up a pen. My heart was beating so hard that my fingers were shaking. I looked at the lines, application for divorce. He looked up. Sarah waited quietly. I won't sign it, he said firmly. Not because I'm afraid, but because I want to prove it to you by my actions. He put his pen on the table and pushed the papers away. The colleagues exchanged glances and quietly walked away without saying a word. Sarah sighed. Okay, so be it. But remember, there's only one chance. There won't be a second one later. I get it, he said. If I make a mistake, I'll sign it myself. She nodded and stood up. Then I'll see you at home. And I went to Daniel to discuss the details of the project. Robert returned to the table. The views of colleagues were different. Someone nodded approvingly, someone said nothing, but there was a feeling in the air. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't hiding or playing a role. Charlotte glanced at it briefly and turned away. Tommy, passing by, said softly, "Well, hold on." Robert raised his glass of water. There was no relief inside, but responsibility, much harder than laughing at the table. At night, already at home, he entered the apartment. There was the same envelope on the table. Sarah left it open. The papers were inside. He took them, flipped through them, carefully put them back, and wrote on the cover with a pen, "I will not sign." Sarah was already asleep in the bedroom. He lay down next to her for the first time, not touching her, but just listening to her breathing. He understood that there was a long job ahead, and if he couldn't do it, he would sign this envelope, not her. A year has passed. Robert really changed during this time. He no longer allowed himself harsh words, took care of the children, regularly took them to sections and clubs, stopped perceiving work as a scene, and learned to remain silent when there was nothing to say. His colleagues began to respect him again, not for his jokes, but for his reliability. But Sarah never came back. She filed for divorce quietly, without scandal, without unnecessary words. I just came in one day and said, "Thanks for trying, but it's probably enough." And she signed the papers. Robert too. They had a new life now. Children on schedule, short correspondence about lessons and clubs, rare conversations without resentment, and past reproaches. Sarah developed a network of centers, opened a second branch, and traveled to conferences. It was as if she had spread her wings, and this flight could no longer be stopped. Robert was left alone, not broken, not killed, just different. He realized that sometimes it's really late, and no amount of effort can bring back what was lost. But there was a truth to that, too. He learned to be a father, a man without a mask. Sometimes he met Sarah at school events. They greeted each other, exchanged news about the children, and each time he saw something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before, the calmness of a woman who has chosen herself. He no longer called her a scarecrow, and he no longer had the right to do so.